Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. Mr. Pickett, I'm going to address my comments to you, and what I'm about to talk about will probably come as no surprise to you. It's not with, I want to acknowledge at the start, it's not within your remit at EPA, but I want you to carry back to your colleagues at EPA my seriousness about this issue and my consternation about it. And I'm talking about the radioactive nuclear contamination in the state of Missouri, and in particular in the St. Louis and St. Charles areas. This dates back to the Manhattan Project, when St. Louis was used as a processing site for uranium. Proudly did their duty. The residents of St. Louis contributed to that important project, but when it was over, the federal government didn't dispose of the waste. They left it for the people of St. Louis to deal with. Worse than that, they negligently attempted to dispose of it themselves, the government did, and what it ended up doing was a whole bunch of it ran off. It was left in oil tankers, drums. There's photos of this that just sat in an open parking lot for years. The runoff went into a creek called Coldwater Creek, North County, St. Louis, where many, many homes were at the time and still are. Generations of kids grew up playing in that creek. Now many, many of them have cancer, autoimmune diseases, you name it. Then a whole nother batch of it was put into a landfill, and that's what I want to bring to your attention because the EPA has jurisdiction over it. It's the Westlake Landfill in Bridgeton, Missouri. That's just right outside of St. Louis. And there, for years now, that landfill has been sitting there with nuclear radioactive material underground, not cleaned up. State of Missouri can't do anything about it because you've got jurisdiction. And now there's a subterranean fire that is burning. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. There's a subterranean fire that is burning in the landfill that threatens to ignite the nuclear material. Meanwhile, the material in the landfill is very close to the water sources, to the water table. Now, this has been going on. When I say years, I don't just mean for a few months, I mean for decades now this has been going on. For decades, and it's not cleaned up at all. In 2018, this has been a Superfund site, could I just say for the record, since 1990.
No objection.
So in 2018, the EPA finally said, well, they come up with a plan for remediation and it'd take 4 years to remediate. 2018. This is 2023. So far, no remediation has been done. The latest thing the EPA said is, well, maybe they'd announce a remediation schedule to begin in 2024. But then in March of this year, the EPA announced that the contamination was worse than they thought, which the residents have been saying for years, and now they cannot provide a timeline for cleanup. I mean, this is unbelievable, which has led to my push, which I'm proud to say has passed the Senate, to make sure that every resident in the St. Louis and St. Charles region who has been exposed to this nuclear contamination from their own government has their medical bills paid for. That is the only fair and just thing to do. Glad to say it passed the Senate. I hope it'll soon pass the House. But here's the deal. I need the EPA to get moving on this and clean this up. A Superfund site since 1990, and there's still nothing being done. EPA sent me a response letter on August 24th of this year, in which they said they still don't have a timeline for remediation. The letter reads in part, once the EPA approves the remedial design and there is an enforceable legal agreement in place with the responsible parties, then the remedial actions process can begin. Oh my gosh. So, Mr. Pickett, I need you to communicate once again to your colleagues at the EPA that this is, people are dying. This is not an acceptable situation. It hasn't been acceptable for decades. And I'll just make one other point here, and that is it's probably no coincidence that the folks who live in this area are not big-time donors to political parties. They're not big-time party activists. These are working people. And they have been taken advantage of for years. And the government for years has just expected them to live with it. And when they said over and over and over, this contamination is bad, this contamination is spreading, there's a ground fire in the landfill, they were told, just shut up and live with it. And they are dying in record numbers. You go look at the cancer rates in the St. Louis region, you'll find them off the charts. You go look at breast cancer for women, in particular in the St. Louis region, you'll find it is the leading center of it in the nation. In the nation. This has got to stop. And we need the EPA to clean this site up. That's my message. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.